Welcome to Praxis Journeys, where we explore the paths of today's most influential leaders in education and the real-world strategies they're using to drive lasting change. I'm Vinay Ganti. In each episode, I sit down with the people shaping the future of our schools to talk candidly about the big issues: teacher recruitment, leadership, innovation, school culture, policy, and more. Whether you're an educator, administrator, or advocate, you'll find fresh ideas and actionable insights to inform your own journey and help students thrive. Let's dive in.
In this conversation, Adam Rubin, founder and CEO of Two Revolutions, discusses the organization's mission to transform education through innovative teacher training and capacity building. He highlights the importance of learner-centered classrooms and the need for systemic changes at the state level. The conversation also explores a partnership with Praxis and ETS to enhance teacher induction and professional development, emphasizing personalized learning and leadership development. Rubin expresses optimism for the future of K-12 education, focusing on competency-based learning and creating more opportunities for all students. Thank you for joining today. Would love to just first give you a chance to introduce yourself.
Excellent. Good to see you, Vinay. My name is Adam Rubin. I am the founder and CEO of an organization called Two Revolutions. And Two Revolutions, we have been working hard to push rocks up hills around the country for a long time. So we have been supporting the transformation of schools, districts, and states since 2008. Our work has been all over the country in, I think, 44 states. We've supported some very large kind of statewide transformation efforts in New Hampshire and Colorado and Wyoming and Arkansas. We've got a number of new states coming on in the next year. Districts have been a huge point of focus for us. In the last decade, we helped lead the design and implementation of 400 new school models and realized that design by no means easy is not the hard part. Implementation of those models is the hard part. So all of our work really focuses on creating more learner-centered and equity-centered classrooms and systems. And we do that work concurrently. We try to really focus on teacher capacity building and leader capacity building because teachers and leaders have the biggest effect size on student learning. So we need to focus on them. But one of the things we've learned over the period of time, a long period of time, 15 plus years, is if we focus on capacity building and we don't focus on helping to remove barriers and the system's conditions, that work can't be successful. That teacher or that leader has a ceiling, and if they run into barriers, that capacity building work is less effective. So the two revolutions are really a capacity building revolution, and we use something called parallel pedagogy, the idea that we need to model for educators the shift that we're aiming at for kids. So the work needs to be learner-centered. The work needs to be competency-based. The work needs to be personalized. And educators have an experience when they go through our training and support that's like, oh, that's what that looks like. That's what that means. And then the second revolution is a systems revolution that has to happen from the bottom up. So we have to pay attention to the teachers and leaders we're working with to help remove barriers. So we do those things we think of them as overlapping meaningfully and concurrent. And that's the kind of work we do all over the country.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. What are some areas that you're really excited about that Two Revolutions is sort of, uh, you know, charging into these days? I mean, you mentioned you've been around since 2008, or 400 different transformation models, 44-ish states. Are there sort of pilots or things today that you're really excited about that you're starting to see maybe even more innovation or more transformation than in the past?
I think we're really excited about how we have the ability to help transform whole states. That's something really exciting to us. So, for instance, in the state of Wyoming, we've been in partnership with the governor's office and the state agency and the university and the state board, as well as the superintendents and the community college system. And we're working with 21 of 48 districts, half the kids in the state. And what's really cool, we just had a celebration a couple of weeks ago. We had about 250, 275 people. But what was really exciting about it was the level of transformation that's happening in classrooms is off the charts, but the same kind of transformation is happening at the state level, from a policy standpoint and from a collaboration standpoint. So this bottom down, bottom up, top down is really playing out there. So I think that's really exciting. Another thing we find really exciting is an opportunity to innovate at different points on the continuum. So I think one of the things that struck us is, where are the biggest pain points? Um, I think we have a lot of pain points around initial teacher training and early teacher professional learning. I think we have a lot of pain points in leadership development. So one of the things we're really excited about moving forward is helping systems rethink induction and rethink early professional learning, because, and we're excited about our partnership with ETS to head down this path. But the efficacy a new teacher has is typically the correlate for whether they stay. So teacher shortage and teacher retention really pass through the first year and the first 3 years of a teaching career. So we're excited about some real innovation we're working on with ETS in that vein. And then we're also excited about moving up that continuum. So we run 6 different graduate programs right now, and we're designing a new EDD that will be, we think, very cutting edge. And we want to win on a few fronts, with our innovations. We want to win with the content. We don't think folks are getting trained in learner-centered pedagogies, learner-centered leadership the way they ought to. We think there's a gap. We don't think that folks are getting trained in a way that works for them. So we really believe when we say competency-based, we mean time is not a factor, mastery is the driver, and regurgitating information is dead on arrival. You actually need to know and be able to demonstrate. So we're really looking at evidence produced by learners. And finally, price. Like, we want to win on price because we want to remove the barrier. So our graduate program is so far below market. It's about $13,000 for a master's right now. And the EDD, we are just building. We're trying to kind of beat the market by 50, 75% on price. So we think if you do great content in a very non-traditional, like job embedded, competency-based way, and you cut the price at least in half, if not more, that's an innovation that the field desperately needs.
Yeah, it's interesting. There was a book I read a long time ago, I think called Moonshots or something like that, and it talks about the different types of innovation, and it sort of compared Pan Am versus American Airlines in like the late 70s and 80s. Pan Am, they sort of went all in on like the bigger, better plane. So their strategy around innovation was like more bells and whistles and and all that stuff. And American Airlines, they just like sort of like chipped away at all this like less sort of exciting forms of innovation. How do we get this a slightly cheaper? And the winner at the end of the day, like we all know the story, Pan Am no longer exists, and American is, I think, well now it's no longer the largest, but was for a while the largest airline by volume for a while in America, at least of the 4 major carriers. And what I'm hearing from you is similar. It's like, look, like the innovation that we're focused on here doesn't necessarily have to be like sexy or shiny. Being able to find a way to deliver something more affordable could have a greater impact on outcomes than like a lot of the other things we're talking about. Because ultimately, you're 100% right. Especially as district budgets are becoming more sort of uh, uncertain in the near term and potentially longer term, and individual teacher salaries are sort of flat, oftentimes in many states. Cost is going to be a big sort of determining factor on future upskilling and people's professional development. I want to touch on a couple other things that you mentioned too, like, that we all would love to come back to. You mentioned sort of transformation of the state level. Curious to know, given sort of what we're hearing from Department of Education and other places at the federal level about the idea of returning money and control and decision making to the states, how does that potentially impact the work that you all are doing, potentially in a positive way, right? As you've already had these state-based relationships. And then after that, we can come back to, I'd love to discuss more about the partnership we're forging as well, because I think that's something that, I think a lot of people might be curious about. But like, let's start there. Like, as states get more control, like where do you see that sort of fall on your?
Yeah, I think it's a huge opportunity, Vinay. I really do. In the states where we're doing our deepest work, not surprisingly, at the state level, assessment and accountability is the biggest barrier to innovation. It's like the pedestrian and the driver conundrum. When you're a pedestrian, you think about the driver being the problem, and when you're a driver, you think about the pedestrian. States
Yeah.
think about the feds as the problem, and feds, are trying to regulate things, to standardize things. So Alabama and Massachusetts have high quality across the board. I think the potential devolution of dollars and control or greater control to states offers a real opportunity in our work to support a greater degree of innovation and transformation at the state level, especially when it comes to assessment and accountability. I think for so long, for the past decade, the state, where we did a lot of work, probably a decade's worth of work, New Hampshire, really innovated on the assessment and accountability front by going to the feds, getting a waiver, and then building a performance assessment based, for competency education model. I think you have to go to the feds, jump through hoops versus to kind of have that decision be a localized state decision to innovate is
Yeah.
an opportunity. I mean, it's fraught with a lot of risk. It's a kind of question, who's the actor in control at the state level, both state board and state agency. But I do think that there's a lot of opportunity. I also think the devolution of dollars in the right hands can support innovation and scaling of innovation. I think we've got no problem seeding new ideas. We've got a good history of that as a country. I think scaling good ideas to ensure that every classroom, regardless of zip code, regardless of, sees the benefits of those innovations. I think there's an opportunity and potential for that to happen at greater degrees if more dollars go to states to make those decisions about how to scale.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. I think you framed it right, which is there's definitely risk because you now have 50 autonomous agencies. But one thing that K-12 historically been poor at is sharing best practices. But
Yeah.
you could make a claim that there's hopefully going to be more incentive to share and shine a spotlight on things that are working in an environment where there are 50 different people, 50 different organizations all trying to figure it out together, especially if you give them all the benefit of the doubt, they're aligned at least in that front. Yeah, I'd love to let's shift gears because I think let's talk a little bit about the partnership that we're forging together, and also I think it's a good opportunity to bring in the sort of the third player in this, which is Eds Up. I'd love to hear, like, love to give you a chance to talk a bit more about them as well. But what we're looking to do together is squarely in that induction space, that early career space, so really around leveraging Praxis text taker data as a starting point, as a meaningful starting point, a diagnostic starting point, which is part of our larger goal of sort of seeing Praxis not at the end of one's journey, but actually at the beginning or the midpoint in one's professional journey. And taking that data and sort of using it as a starting point or a springboard for you all to be able to do that sort of personalized induction. Why is personalizing or differentiated induction so important these days? I know the answer, but I'd love to hear from you, I think, or I think I have an idea of what the answer is, but I'd love to hear first from you why you think like the time is now for this type of solution where induction is an area of focus for you all or
Yeah.
for us.
Yeah. No, I appreciate the question. I was so excited when we started our conversation, Vinay. At this point, it's been it's been a minute, but I think the evolution of our collaboration has been really exciting from my perspective because there is such an opportunity for Praxis not to be a hurdle, but for Praxis to be an entrance point and for Praxis to be an invitation to get better. And the nature of accountability is such that there are hoops that are put up, you jump through the hoops and you proceed. And I think what we all know is whatever hoops we jump through, Praxis in this case, we're not done. We're not finished. We're not right. We're not ready. We've made it through a hoop. And I think the opportunity for 2Rev to collaborate with Eds Up and with ETS, I think is huge because I think the opportunity to collaborate with ETS to take the hurdle of Praxis and turn it into the opportunity that exists, which is every educator enters with a different knowledge base and skill set around their teaching practices as well as around their content knowledge. I believe, and research really plays this out, that we overdevelop on the content knowledge front. We underdevelop on the pedagogic or kind of teaching pedagogies, teaching front, teaching the instructional skill set. And I think it's to the loss of hundreds of thousands of kids to have a teacher who knows their content, who can't convey their content, or who can't engage the classroom, or who doesn't know how to build effective relationships. All of our work, when you boil it off, is about how do we empower and support educators to build the knowledge and skills and mindsets to engage every learner all the time. And it's a high bar. And I think the ability to use a diagnostic, the PLT, which I know you'll speak to in more depth, at the front of somebody's teaching, whether they come in emergency cert, whether they come traditional route, and then use that data to personalize the professional learning. One of the innovations that we've hatched over the past couple of years is a micro learning environment. And this micro learning environment uses an adaptive algorithm. So it basically learns you as a learner, moves you. Vinay might take 10 minutes, Adam might take 25 minutes to go through a module based on what I'm able to get right. But knowledge by itself is not the destination, because all the adaptive algorithm does is the computer facilitates the pace at which you are demonstrating that you know something. How lovely that I know something, but what we care about in the real world is not your knowledge of it, but your ability to apply that knowledge into a variety of different contexts. So, part of the solution that we're working on with ETS is using a diagnostic, the PLT, upfront to then develop a queue, a set of online content, micro learning modules, 15, 20, 30 minutes. Like, nobody's got time for something crazy and deep. We need some knowledge to be delivered. And then there's an expectation through a demonstration of learning that you're sharing evidence that you did this in your classroom. So if that was the solution, that would be amazing. But we know that we learn with mentoring and with peer support as well. So the solution is really a front-end diagnostic plus a library of online micro modules that kind of meet you based on what the diagnostic shows your gaps are. And then we also are putting in place a local or regional mentor coach to facilitate learning among peers. Who are the other 50 new teachers within your building, within your district, within your region who can benefit from learning on their own and with each other under the expert support of a master teacher? And we think if you combine personalized online learning and then synchronous and asynchronous community of practice, we think there's a huge opportunity to grow your efficacy as a teacher, grow your sense of belonging with peers, and keep you in the profession. And we also have the ability in this solution to provide CEUs or grad credits, because we know everyone aspires to earn more. That's human nature. And these credits, be them CEUs for recertification or grad credits to work toward your first master's or your second master's, likely your first master's in this context, keeps you in the game. And then we believe that the PLT plays a role at the end to check in on how much did you learn over 6 months, 9 months, to give you actionable data as a young teacher. And we think with that support system of knowledge building, skill building, and incentivizing, we think we keep you in the profession and we make you more successful. Which, by the way, Vinay, and I know we've talked about this over the months, the biggest cause for teacher departure is lack of efficacy. The second biggest is working conditions, and the third biggest is pay. So if we can control for the first two through a solution like this, or at least have an impact, I think we have a real chance at cutting the teacher shortage and increasing the duration of a successful teaching.
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit on a lot of great things, and one of the things I really love about this model that we're piloting and we're looking to scale, going back to sort of seeding versus scaling. is the sort of role of the asynchronous and the synchronous, right? So it's like you get to personalize on the individual level with the asynchronous, but then you get to customize at the cohort level with the synchronous, right? So it's that's where the data from the PLT becomes. So the PLT is a suite of exams that we have here at Praxis that really does focus on understanding the underlying pedagogical understanding of teachers, right? So it can serve as a really strong starting point for this journey. But what it can also do is then it says, okay, so you're weak on these areas as an individual, so that's we're going to sort of adapt the algorithm to sort of focus there. But then we know that the 50 incoming teachers, maybe in your department, across your district, or whatever it might be, across multiple districts, they're all struggling across these three areas the most when it comes. And so we're going to be able to focus and drive the synchronous sort of subject area sessions and facilitations around this things where the most number of people will be able to benefit together, right? And we'll be able to actually facilitate those peer-to-peer insights and learning. Or, we could go even in a even more multifaceted way, which is like maybe even identify people who have excelled in one of the areas on the PLT and those who have struggled and create even sub mentorship sort of matching and sort of, those sort of buddy system type of models, right? So it really becomes super interesting that what it becomes available when we match high quality data, valid data from a test that has been vetted and is sort of statistically relevant and valid with this sort of personalized asynchronous model combined with synchronous engagement. And the other thing we shouldn't sort of ignore is like part of the reason I think we spent a lot of time designing the model this way is also with cost in mind, right? So the idea would be that this should be a scalable and relatively affordable way for a district or even a state as we talk about the devolution of dollars and potentially states being able to look at things in a more strategic way to really roll this out at scale without breaking the bank. So that's super exciting as well. Um, you mentioned earlier sort of the role of leaders as well. And you mentioned that the top three reasons why people leave is efficacy, they lose faith in being able to make a difference. And then number two is working conditions. We know a big part of the working conditions piece is who they're working for. People don't leave bad companies; they leave bad managers. The same thing's true in K-12. What are some of the things that 2Rev you all are looking at, or where do you feel like the leverage points are from a leadership standpoint? And how can we sort of look at that from a systemic level? And what are sort of the innovations that the ecosystem should be thinking about for leaders?
I love the question. Let me come there in one sec. The async synchronous piece I think is really important to double click on.
Yeah,
I think this idea of respecting working professionals. So we know districts and ESAs and states care about cost, and so do we. So we want these solutions to be scalable. But when we think about these solutions working for the educators, we really are trying to kind of get the right balance of asynchronous, light touch, like limited time learning. And then the synchronous work all of this learning needs to be job embedded, meaning we don't want to create more work for somebody. It's hard when you are a working professional. We all know that. So we're really trying to be efficient, ultimately under the umbrella of being more respectful for any educator participating. The other thing I want to speak to is the content itself. So the Two Revolutions team has worked really closely with the ETS team to look at the research on high leverage teaching practices. So all of the content that will be in this online micro learning library is anchored to the research base that is pretty well founded at this point around a set of high leverage teaching practices that have demonstrable impact on an educator's efficacy. So that's an important point, I think. Just as we talk about this solution, this isn't building any library. It's building a library and then using the diagnostic, the PLT, to kind of shine a light on those areas of gaps or areas for needed reinforcement. In terms of leadership and how leadership can support this and innovations on the leadership front, I think we have a paucity of leaders, quite honestly. I think we have a lot of managers out there. And I think we can't wait for Superman. We have Lois Lane and Jimmy teaching or leading, but we've got to get Lois Lane and Jimmy better. We've got to improve their skill set. So I think that there are huge opportunities to think about leadership development around some core transferable skills for how you empower others to lead. Like distributed leadership is a term we've used as a
Yeah.
field for a decent amount of time. I think this idea of leveraging the expertise is a place for leadership development. Again, American Airlines, Pan Am, Sony, RCA, like there's a raft of examples of kind of innovation that has happened that isn't so sexy, but it's the game. And I really think
Yeah.
around leadership development, I think there's this human-centered desire to know your teams and build opportunities for your team to lead. I think another more technical solution, I think that's an adaptive solution. And I think there needs to be a lot more work with leaders on adaptive leadership. How do you manage change processes? I think technically, how do you know what you're looking for, as an instructional leader? And I think there are opportunities to develop better tools, super simple, like walk through tools with very key and clear and simple look fors that you can norm with your team around for, like, this is what I want to see in our classrooms, and this is what our professional learning should align to, and this is how we're going to support our educators. I think one more lever that is not simple but not complicated is the country over the past decade has been gaga over graduate profiles or, portraits of a graduate.
Yep.
I think it's a great idea. And, we've been involved in helping to develop hundreds of them around the country. I think where it's a problem is when it stops there, and it often does. It's a website, it's a poster. I feel really self-congratulatory when I have one. I would challenge us as educators to really think about, if I have a portrait, what is my portrait of an educator? And how
Yeah.
could I construct that with my educators? If this is what we want kids to know and be able to do when they cross the stage in fifth grade, eighth grade, and 12th grade, awesome. That's what our community is excited about. Critical thinking and communication and creativity and ELA and math, awesome. And they're pretty much the same in every state and every district we've ever been
Right.
in. But if we challenge ourselves to think about what are the knowledge, skills, and mindsets, or what are the competencies we want our educators to have, I think that is game changing for
Yeah.
any leader to kind of document that in partnership with your educators and with your union, if you're a union state, and then to really shift the evaluation, because we know what measures, matters. Fortunately, unfortunately, it doesn't matter. It's what we kind of keep score on is what we do. So we need to build that pretty poster for educators and for leaders. And then we need to evaluate them against those updated competencies. And I think if we do that, plus have a tool set that supports leaders in doing that, plus build more distributed leadership, I think you've got healthier environments across the board.
I think that's, uh, yeah. I mean, I think you hit on something so sort of like it resonated a lot with me, just like the portrait of the educator. And in some ways, that's, I think, I don't know if it was intentional, but in some ways, the high leverage teaching practice that you talk about, that we've done a lot of time at ETS researching and is undergirding a lot of the partnership that we're going on together, is sort of like a precursor to something like that, right? And it's almost like, and it's almost amazing when you compare teaching to or education to other industries that isn't already in place, right? That norming isn't already in place. And I always compare it back to like healthcare and nursing and other professions like that, where you know if you ask somebody like what it means to be a good nurse, I think you'd be able to get to some level of coherence or alignment across 10 different people pretty quickly. Whereas if you ask what it takes to be a good teacher, I think that conversation even today is so much more open-ended. And
Totally.
and so there's something really interesting about this idea of like being part of a larger conversation around what is a portrait of an educator, especially in a world where now we're going to have 50 different semi-autonomous agencies sort of thinking about those types of things. Well, I guess I'll pause here and sort of get like sort of we can wrap up with one last sort of um, question for you, Adam, and thank you again for your time today. Where are you most optimistic about K-12 going forward? Where do you see sort of the opportunities? Like, let's end on a high note here. I think there's a lot of work to be done, and we're working together on trying to solve a big part of that, early career induction. But where are you excited to sort of forge ahead in over the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, it's a softball and a hardball question given the world we're living in. But I do have hope. I think it's connected to this idea of these portraits, these profiles,
Yeah,
actually.
yeah,
So we're living in a world, whether you're listening to this and you're red, whether you're blue, whether you're purple, doesn't matter. I think the world is shifting. And I think this idea of career connected learning and work based learning is having not just a renaissance, I think it's growing. And
yeah.
why this excites me is because I see in our own work around the country and, in what I'm reading in other parts of the country, we have these student competencies that everyone cares about. The workforce cares about, families care about, kids care about, educators validate. The research base, the Chicago Research Consortium in 2005 had this seminal study that showed the 5 C's back then were the biggest correlates to college persistence and success. And yet
Right,
we didn't measure them and we still don't measure them. So
right,
I'm seeing a move toward um, more hands-on learning for kids, greater degrees of work-based learning for all kids, where they're looking for evidence of those competencies of creativity, collaboration, communication, critical thinking, which is what every parent, I have 4 kids. You, I know, have children, like a lot of our listeners have children. That's what we want from our public education system. And I think that there's an opportunity for us to begin to deliver on that more and more. And I think it's tied in with a lot of the answers. I think there's an opportunity to realize those portraits concretely. I think there's an opportunity for assessment and accountability systems locally and at state levels to begin to give weight, currency to those competencies on those state profiles, of which 40 plus states have them. So I think that's really exciting. And I do think that there's a desire also, and I see more demand for mastery based or competency based learning. And we don't need to get ridiculously jargony here. I want a kid to know and be able to demonstrate what they can do. And I think that there's an increased drive for that. And I think if both of those things are increased in the next 5 years, you've got a lot of American students getting more relevant experiences in K-12, getting more exposure in K-12, and leaving with much more, knowledge and skills. So I'm really hopeful about that. And I think that that can bring personalized learning and deeper learning and competency based learning. I think that can breathe life into it. And I think ultimately for me, it's about, does every kid have an opportunity? Do they have more opportunities and good opportunities when they cross the stage for the handshake at graduation? And I think this kind of conversation, if we play it out, it creates more opportunities and better opportunities for each kid, regardless of their zip code, regardless of their parents' socioeconomic background. And that's, from my mind, what public education in our country needs to be about. More opportunities for each kid.
it's the mobilizer. Well, Adam, thank you again for your time today. I really appreciate it. Like, we're super excited about the partnership we have together and also all the other great work you're doing at Two Revolutions. I wish you all the best and look forward to chatting again soon.
Thank you, Vinay. Appreciate the time. Good conversation.
Take care.
Well, thanks for listening to Praxis Journeys. You can subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. And if you know someone who would find this conversation helpful, feel free to share it with them. I'm Vinay Ganti, and until next time, keep learning, keep leading, and keep working toward the kind of change our students deserve.